like you have to, oops, in a way, plan not for pitfalls, but make like an appropriate slot for where pitfalls could occur, but as if you're automatically mitigating them to the point where you're just putting them in their place. And that way, in a way, you don't even have to, they don't have to exist in the same way consciously that when you don't put them in place and they kind of force their way in a sense. It's going to be there anyway, according to perspective. There's always a proportion. There's no such thing as, perfection without proportionality, and in that sense, a gradient shift. So it's kind of conditioning yourself to understand that. Huh. So the program was that everybody's minds was the time duration was enhanced by increasing the stress on everyone's mind by introducing automatic conflict resolution schematics, fractal generation of friction-based psyche development, if you will, contrainment or entrainment. And it was used to artificially stimulate the kind of neurological growth expansion of the species before we had the experience to emotionally handle that type of workload. And so it meant, like, as people would dream, their dreams were overtaken with the deformed, extrapolated, kind of loose end fractal realities of these programs gone awry, meaning islands of consciousness and memory that had no way of merging back into reality with the whole singular system. These the sensors are a way of doing that, and that's what's going to happen. People, went nuts in that way. And so where you see things being organized, those are kind of system architecture hierarchies built into the neural networks as load supporting structures to enable and assist the integration of the it's almost like emergency services to ensure that the life supporting systems are kept online in an event of a crisis. That's what those systems are. That's what's going on when information is being organized and people are being basically shown what's going on and who's who. Kind of like in Carly's recent video, everybody who pays attention to this will know what I'm talking about. I think Carly Nolan, I can put a link to that or not. That's the process of these systems pretty much being saved, but the idea is it's not necessarily going to save all that junk that's going on down there. The idea is to basically, in those memory archives, there are individuals that are no longer basically, they're like shells of intelligence systems. There's no longer energy there to keep going. It's just autonomous. It's like a brain on drugs without if it came out of a system. And so, and it can reposition itself and reclone itself over and over again. Well, shit, what is that? That's not how a human consciousness works. And, there's a little gradient that drops out, the soul resonance from the source, not program, but the organic program. And so there were aspects of individuated consciousness of humanity trapped in those memory archives inside the neural networks of these parasitic host consciousness beings, basically, that more or less cannibalize the consciousness of people brought into the system. And so, in the same sense, you're simultaneously seeing the installation of those experiences. You're also seeing the resolution with the kind of bounce back of the memory. And so, there's great importance behind that. If I can, and so then, while these were being fought, these realities, these fractured, fractal memory shard, like soul shard identities separated, resulting in dissociation in the inker realities. We were separated. We were cut off from the whole, and so we were fighting them pretty much alone within ourselves, or with a small clique, a small group. Okay, it was almost like everyone's consciousness of themselves. We all got split up as a species, or the networks and the collectives were all that were. And as a result, it was like going into a gang area and getting jumped in an alleyway basically every battle, every time. And now that's obviously, none of them were like that. Well, there were military skirmishes or continued terroristic feuds between clans and so on, from group to neighboring to faction to, we're looking at nation and so on. And so, but the idea is, before, when it was as if it would go on and there was no end in sight. It was like the screen that we had to scroll from, and the width or the amount of information we could see at once was so friggin' narrow. It was like a tiny staircase that we had to go up. We didn't know how far one way or the other was. And so looking back at the memory, it's almost impossible to count by stair 5,940 to 7,920 where the hell we were in a 50,000 stair scope of what was going on. And it was basically just 1,000 little fractals trying to get put back together so you can have big enough pieces where they can self-recognize with the whole. And part of that was to build up enough information that made it that we had the longest trajectory of doing this. But again, when that's not done with the right endurance and focus, perceptual system, whether it's pleasure, pain, or something higher, and detail focus, and then time duration based on your kind of like your endurance, your willpower endurance, if you will. It's like being dragged through a reality you can't turn off, like a dream. It's like a dream, but it's literally as if it were designed to force your mind into situations that are alien and foreign to you, and the distinct quality, connecting quality between them all is they're increasingly like, what the F, like alien. And so this is in that it was because tech grew out of control and people made these realities and so on, and their mind did, and the neural networks and so on. And so I'm not saying there is to blame, there isn't to blame. I'm just saying that's the nature of that, and it's like the Star Trek episode with the crazy shit and the false realities or whatever. But it's like that way because that's how it would turn out. And so then the solution, when we woke up, we realized we were fighting for a long time, and ultimately we don't know why we're fighting. We just know we're fighting, and we thought we knew why, in the sense that there's opposition, but everything else had moved on or fallen away. So it was literally like waking up in darkness, and the only thing that was the essence of our fighting. And it was always in struggle, where there were small groups of basically humanity surviving against hordes of the appearance of something else. When we began to wake up, we realized we're out on a reality spiral. We're in between fractal frames of reference, and pretty much we're in a dimensional, temporal domain that's outside of the human species frame of reference. And however that works, and sorry for the mouth noises, I know they're probably there. And so ultimately, it always turns into some type of trick or illusion where the obstacle shrinks and dissolves away, as if somebody else is using some type of gun or projection system or weaponry, playing a puppetry game with our emotions, perceptions, or fears, or our life. Like somebody's dangling resources above our head, and in some way we're seeing this obstacle and this thing, whether it's an illusion or not, and in reality we're fighting for our lives on some other plane where somebody's basically torturing us, or simply being inducing poverty for their own enjoyment, and that equates to, in the overall vision, life looking at itself and seeing itself torture itself, and to the point of seeing itself invade and infest itself and do all this crazy shit. Life itself, the subconscious probably doesn't know how to differentiate between that if we don't know how to turn it on or off. No, sorry, minimal processing. So a lot of that, ultimately we began working together. The human side works together ultimately. So where humanity was drawn off into fractal spirals, and we're like way down here inside this inverted background darkness of some other species or dimension, whatever this world is within, it was because all of humanity was in these working against itself, fighting these wars, kind of wedging itself by growing away from itself further into the dark where we're surrounded by all this other shit. By realizing we're playing some type of weird effed up game of like throwing a tantrum, and as a result our reality is crushing and collapsing into this weird shit. But the same difference is the idea of it's kind of like a child throwing a tantrum and tomorrow it'll be fine, or in a couple hours it'll be fine, and they made it all up in their heads in a sense. And somehow we work together, or doesn't mean work together for what anybody thinks it means, other than coming back to the light, where if anything went on and so on, everyone comes back to the light where everything is visible for all to see. That's what those points being out and then working together, not that they work together in the dark, like, oh yeah, we're in the dark, yeah, let's pass this shit that way through the dark and keep everybody drawn out in these expanded fractals where people are kind of, no. It means going back so that everything is drawn back in, not hiding from what's going on, but in the sense of taking self-accountability and holding others accountable as well for everything that's done to you, and not responding like they are the god of this dimension because they believe themselves to be mightier because of their ability to use the dark to hold power over others. Because ultimately, once we realize that, that's an illusion, and so we're playing this big childish game with ourselves as a species. But on this level, it's almost like the higher is doing that or something like that. On this level, it's humans, and anything that goes on there is according to what humans consider to be reasonable behavior for life in general. And so if it doesn't mean in any sense that in these systems out in the dark, or at least controlling the system here from the dark way out there in that fractal where anything can go on, there is no international water. In other words, if we can access it and you can do things that influence people here, then it's in the same way this water and this land. Now, does that mean it's the same right that since we're there and they're here, will they have the same consequence, or the same right? They have the same consequence, meaning everybody plays by the same rules, or you don't play because you're not part of this game. There's no hiding. And if we want to see what's going on and people are wielding power through that, then we have the right to. And it was designed as a toxic weaponized system, so only, it had to happen in a way that people could be immunized. The species had to be immunized against the poison that they developed that would be emotionally and consciously toxic to those looking to see the truth, to determine what was going on and how to figure out what to do. Ultimately, the solution was the same, and all that doesn't matter because the cable, the solution is to not be afraid and not treat the boogeyman like they're real, because they're a creation of the fact that we don't know each other's stories. For instance, that dark thing, we're off in a fractal, spiral, and on this one way out here, so-and-so boogeyman and so-and-so clan is putting its pressure on humanity, and you got one dumbass leader leading everybody out into the dark and this, that, and the other, and claiming that we're stuck out here and this, that, and don't find out about yourself and all this other stuff, and end up just cycling back to humanity and going, what was that? It was like a daydream of bullshit illusion or whatever. It just fills itself back in. It's like that spooky guy over there. On the other side, it's the exact opposite guy. It's a jester over here wearing a black hat and white stripes and dancing around this way. And over there, it's a jester with the white hat and black stripes and dancing around this way. It's once you see the whole thing, you're like, oh, it's an aspect of our shadow. It's an illusion. You shine this thing this way. What we're changing, and like, oh shit, it's the thing on the wall, the cave or whatever, and we're running from it. We realize we're perceptually creating a kind of holographic crepuscular illusion dimensionally with our mind by running away from the shadow between the light source, pivoting the shadow so it turns towards us, or it looks like it, and so on, and playing this game chasing our tail with dimensions and illusions. Now, the idea with other species and all that stuff, people are playing games of attempting to create the fractal inside inverted based upon the darkness out here, as if that's going to fill in the darkness here and make there'll be outside a fractal of life just filled up with humanity. It doesn't even make any sense. It literally means taking the inside of reality and making it the outside, and then living inside that, whatever that means. you can do it, but you can only do it doing the opposite of the type of shit you do here, and that became those false realities in a way. I'm gonna go back to the first video now and working on that. Can't stop me. The first one was better. Oh, all right. So then, it's like you have to be taken down to not knowing what you're familiar with, possibly not liking it, and go back in order to know who you are in that sense. And I can't remember the other thought. You can kind of see like that, or see that. Oh, this is the same recording as before. Let me start a new one.